I know it might not feel like it right now, but it really is. It's the only way to make the bad mean something. Bury it. Bury it. Pile good on top of good.
Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'll be talking about Ozark Season 4 Part 2. If you just finished Part 1, you probably have a lot of questions, and that's what I'll be looking at in this video, including when can we expect the second half. I'll be getting into all the questions I had after I made my Part 1 video, and questions I got from you guys in the comments there, but I do have to give you a quick spoiler warning. If you haven't watched all of Ozark through Season 4 Part 1, then this video won't be for you. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. So the biggest question everyone has is, when will Part 2 come out? The date hasn't been announced yet, but there's a couple of things that we can look at that will give us a good idea. First, they filmed all 14 episodes at the same time. They broke them up into 2 parts consisting of 7 episodes each, but they don't have to go back into production in between. This means that they'll probably do something similar to what they did with Money Heist in its final season. They split that into 2 parts and aired the second half 3 months later. Doing that with Ozark seems likely, and it's worth mentioning that this is a Netflix show that has won some Emmys in the past. In order for this season to be eligible this year, all the episodes would have to air by May 31st. So for a prediction, I think it's safe to say that it'll be coming out in 2022. I think the end of April makes the most sense, and I would be surprised if it did come out after that, if it wasn't out by the end of May. I think after that finale, the next big question is, what will Ruth's next move be? She knows the cartel killed Wyatt and Darlene, and she does seem bent on going after Javi after Jonah tipped her off. For an average person, this would be a suicide mission, and even though it would be a mistake to think of Ruth as average, it's still hard to imagine how she'd be able to take him out without serious repercussions. And they set her up to be in a place where she's essentially lost everything, so that might not hold her back. With Javi having a deal with the FBI, there are a lot of interested parties, including the Byrdes, that don't want to see anything happen to him. I mentioned in my last video, I'm curious to see the differences in how Marty and Wendy react to Ruth saying, "If you want to stop me, you're going to have to kill me." They made points in Part 1 to show that Marty still wants to protect Ruth, and the same can't be said for Wendy. They have a shared interest in wanting to stop her, but different feelings about Ruth as a person. This is similar to their divide over how to deal with Jonah. And Marty was to the point of saying that they wouldn't stay together when they went back to Chicago in their argument over that before he got the phone call about taking Navarro to meet with the FBI. I guess the one thing we can say for sure is that Ruth is going to do something. I don't think it's reasonable to think she could be talked out of a response. She's low on allies though, and Frank Jr. is really the only established character that is around for her to turn to. He could take control of the Kansas City mob in his father's absence, but they also seem outmatched by the cartel, so Ruth would have to come up with a pretty impressive plan to utilize him and his organization. I think he will play a part. They certainly set him up to be on her side, but we'll have to wait and see what that actually looks like. There's also the possibility that this new character Chuck might emerge as an ally. She was a friend of Ruth's mom, who she went to buy those seeds as a wedding gift for Wyatt and Darlene. I couldn't help but think that they did a lot of work to paint her as a compelling character if that would turn out to be her only appearance, so I looked her up on IMDb and it has her listed for 8 episodes. That website isn't always accurate, but this does lead me to believe that she'll at least play a role in Part 2, and that seems like the makings of a pretty good team up. There's also another interesting casting detail for Part 2. We're also going to be seeing Javi's mother, Camila Elizondro. She'll be involved in the remaining episodes. I suppose if something did happen to him, then she could come looking for revenge, or may even have to take over the cartel after what happened to Navarro. Although that deal with the FBI might just mean that she steps in to advise her son with her brother out of the way. It's not really clear what will happen with Zeke or the farm, and both of those complicate things. Technically, Zeke should just be returned to Child Protective Services, and he's not in the car with the Byrdes when they crash, so it doesn't look like he'll end up with them as far as we can tell. As for the farm, Ruth was on the outs with Darlene, which makes it hard to imagine that she might gain control of it. 3 is still around, and he was Wyatt's next of kin, but he's not really a main character at this point. There is potential for someone to fill that void, but who that might be doesn't seem clear as far as I can tell. The car crash that the family has in the opening episode is probably the thing I've seen people ask about the most. I do think this is a flash forward to something that'll happen in part 2, not a dream or some other kind of trick. And so to me, it's just a question on when does this happen? I think the implication is that it happens at the end as they're just about to get out of the Ozarks for good, but the writers are using it to play with our expectations. I thought it was going to happen in the part 1 finale right up until it didn't. It could happen earlier and be the catalyst for a final descent. Remember, a car crash played a major role in them going down this path in the first place, so that is something to consider. I've seen a lot of wild speculation about this, from Ruth being the one driving the truck to it being an elaborate setup for them faking their own deaths, and none of them sound very plausible. However, I do think there's probably a twist of some sort, considering that they opened the season with it. That said, what still kinda stands out the most is that they're all on the same page before it happens. There was a lot of family tension throughout part 1. Wendy is still not over what happened with Ben. That's coming out in a lot of different ways. Jonah is definitely not over it. He's using that as a reason to rebel against his family, and Marty and Wendy are pretty much at odds by the end of the season. And yet here they all are together, and it looks like they're getting out of town. And I suppose that is another big question. Will the Foundation be their ticket to something different? If anything was sort of going in the right direction for the family, it was the work that Wendy was doing in setting that up. Of course, there's a cost that comes along with that, but if the FBI is taking over the laundering for the cartel and they're looking for offices to set up the Foundation in Chicago, then this has come together as their escape plan. I wondered about the choice to show flashbacks to season 1 with Bruce, his old partner, towards the end of part 1. Those work to show how Marty has been changed by the way things played out in the Ozarks. It makes me wonder if Wendy and Jonah will have something similar happen by the time of the car accident. Outside of the family, we have a couple of wild cards. We have the private investigator, Mel Maya. Considering that he's been shown to be as competent as he is annoying, I think he has things figured out as far as the Byrde's connection to the cartel. That would explain why he contacted Maya in the finale. She'd be our second wild card, and based on what we've seen so far, it looks like Mel will add fuel to her "I'm gonna do the job I signed up for" fire. I refer to them as wild cards because I'm not sure what purpose they serve beyond complicating things for the Byrdes, or I guess in Maya's case, the Byrdes and the federal government that she works for. They're not the type of characters that would pack an emotional punch if they got in over their heads and were eliminated as a result. There might be more to what motivates Mel that we haven't seen yet, but I think he's mostly telling the truth when he says he's there looking for Helen. Beyond them, everything else is just big picture questions. Will Javi just run the cartel in partnership with the FBI? Will the Byrde family make it out and run the Foundation as a way to launder their past? Will Wendy and Marty stay married? Will the family all survive? Should they all survive? And then what about Ruth? Can she get herself out, or are we seeing an origin story about a future boss of a brand new criminal organization? Maybe after I've thought about it some more, I'll make a predictions video, but for now I think that's a good place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about part 1 and how that sets up the final part of Ozark. How do you think this thing is going to end? Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.